Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of St. Anne Home.
Welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. Here now is your host, Chad Amond, President and CEO of the Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce.
Hello and welcome to Westmoreland Community Connections. I'm your host, President and CEO of the Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce, Chad Amond. I am delighted to have on the show Scott Kokoski. He is the Managing Director of Changing Our World. That's a very good description. Changing Our World is the name of your business, and you are changing our world. And so Scott works he interacts with not-for-profit agencies all the time, and they are changing our world. Thank you, Scott, for being on the show.
Chad, pleasure to be with you. Thanks for having me.
So tell the listeners, what is your background and how did you get into this field for not-for-profit agencies?
Chad, native of Westmoreland County, and proud and native son of Western Pennsylvania. My own life story inspired me to want to do something to pay it forward and impact those who are serving others in our world. When I was a child, that took various forms. There was a point in my childhood where I wanted to be a priest. There was a point in my childhood where I wanted to be a teacher. And when I was in college, because of the scholarship that I earned in school that allowed me and really only allowed me to attend college, I decided that I wanted to do something to help other kids like me be able to access an education. I learned through a mentor that could take the picture of being a professional fundraiser to support college students. And so I could not major in that at the time. I gained some experience, was able to go to graduate school and then begin a 14-year career in higher education fundraising. I then transitioned to leadership and management in the nonprofit space. I had moved around the country and have lived and worked all around the country. And about 6 years ago, a friend and I decided that instead of serving one singular institution by raising money to support that institution, maybe we could serve the profession of not-for-profit organizations looking to impact the world and impact lives. So we created a tiny consulting firm, mainly just to see if anybody would hire us as kind of a test. Right. And that parlayed itself into my co-creating a firm about 4 years ago that amassed 76 clients around the country, and 50% of them earned the single largest gift in their history. And finally, within the last couple of months, I've transitioned from that firm to a much larger firm, widely regarded as one of the most impactful impact consulting firms in the world, based in New York and with an office here in the in Pittsburgh, called Changing Our World.
Yeah.
But I got into it because of a desire to serve others, inspired by my own life story. Well,
you lived around the country and you came back to southwestern Pennsylvania, and that's the boomerang, right?
Yes, that's the word that describes it perfectly. I think we live in a part of the country where our values mean so much if you grew up here. And I think we define family in a very special way. I think we define southwestern Pennsylvania when we live outside of southwestern Pennsylvania. Mm-hmm. And I always make the joke, anyone grows up in Pittsburgh and they move away from Pittsburgh, you could set a watch to them because they'll be back.
Yeah, right.
Invariably.
Well, it's a good thing and a bad thing that we have all of those Steeler bars around the country. So, we need to make sure that we increase our population. But that's another discussion. But, Scott, what are the major trends that you see within the not-for-profit space today?
The nonprofit space, or the philanthropy space, some people call it the social sector. So pick your phrase, Chad. But this is a space or an industry that is about 75 years old in its modern era. Okay, and for the first time in its modern era, it's undergoing a sea change. You think of other industries. Pick one. Out there in the world. And they are always evolving. They're always having to change to keep up with market conditions, to keep up with competitors.
Industry 4.0.
Absolutely.
Yeah, right.
Absolutely. But this is the first time that the nonprofit space has ever really had to take a look in the mirror and say, wait a minute, will what got us here get us there? And the answer is no. And so you talk about major trends in the not-profit or the social sector space today. First of all is technology and the advent of social media. You used to be able to jump online and tell the difference between a large nonprofit organization and a small not-profit organization. You can't do that anymore because anyone who knows how to code and anyone who knows how to run Twitter quite effectively can make the smallest not-for-profit agency look and feel like a behemoth agency, which will impact the funding scenario for those agencies, which will impact public perception, media coverage, and ultimately impact. So technology by far has been the largest thing. Societal events have been huge too. Take a look at what has happened just in this country within the last 20 years. 9/11, Katrina, the recession, the comeback from the recession, and the tax legislation in 2017. Those are 5 kind of mega events that have defined how nonprofits, number 1, survive, number 2, adapt, and number 3, have a chance to thrive. And then I would say finally, us, man, ourselves as people, our attention spans have reduced by, I think, 95%, scientifically over the past 25 years. We now must consume things in 280 characters or less in USA Today size bites and morsels. We live for the soundbite. We don't read as much. We aren't as researched and learned as we were as consumers. And so how the nonprofit space attracts attention and support has totally changed. And it's impacted and reflected in the way that we give and pay attention to these agencies who are trying to do good in the world. Last thing I would say is, how many nonprofits were there 20 years ago, both in Westmoreland County, in Western Pennsylvania at large, and in the country? Okay. Now, how many are there today?
I'm going to say more.
A lot more. If we are posing the question, Chad, are there too few nonprofits today, or are there too many nonprofits today? And by and large, the answer is we have too many. We actually have too many nonprofit agencies in this country.
And maybe does Changing Our World focus on merging those not-for-profits?
So when, not that is a specific business goal of changing our world, but we certainly have encountered situations where we can help nonprofits understand that their mission, their vision, their why, their purpose, their service areas may be totally redundant with another agency also trying to do good in the community and serve a similar pocket or segment of the population, but they might be down the street from each other. It used to be that when you wanted to go out when there was a disaster, you would support the American Red Cross. Okay. Yeah. When you wanted to do good in the community, you would support perhaps the United Way, or there was one homeless nonprofit in the community. Well, now there's not just one homeless nonprofit in the community. You can say, I want to impact this specific neighborhood in the community, and now I want to impact this specific population in this specific neighborhood in this community. And so we live in the area today of the niche nonprofit, or the micro nonprofit organization. And sometimes a consultant's job is to walk in and show what the landscape looks like, okay, and what sources of quote-unquote competition for revenue and attention look like, and say, wait a minute, beyond the fact that you're fighting for the same dollars and the same grants in this community, you're also doing kind of like the same thing, but you're right down the street from each other. Why have the infighting? Let's work together.
You're listening to Westmoreland County Community Connections on Hometown Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. We're talking with Scott Kokoski. He is the managing director of Changing Our World. And Scott, how is the not-for-profit world different than it was a generation ago? We talked about that somewhat, but I mean, the internet is not just a fad anymore, right?
I think it's here to stay.
I think it's here to stay, yeah. Right? But I mean, some small not-for-profits. I mean, in my opinion, they only have the ability to focus on paying the bills and the staff, and so I run a not-for-profit, a 501c6, and we make sure that we focus on our mission and impacting the business community and impacting Westmoreland County and all of southwestern Pennsylvania. But how has this changed for a generation ago?
You have to, if you are a nonprofit leader listening to this conversation, folks, you've got to be able to tell your story. You have got to be able to articulate your why, your purpose, and the impact that you are making in the world. You have to justify it in a way that you didn't have to a generation ago. Again, 25 years ago, if you were the United Way, if you were the Red Cross, if you were Habitat for Humanity, if you were pick a nonprofit, an anchor nonprofit in the community, you were there. You didn't have much competition around you. You didn't really have to sell yourself or justify your existence, or frankly, what you were really even doing with the money, because you were an organization, and as an organization, you were a trusted entity. Here's the deal, Chad. In this generation, the age of Gen Y, Gen Z, the millennial, the post-millennial generation, it's not just being an organization, a good organization. People don't give to organizations anymore. People give to causes. And if you are running a nonprofit, used to getting those checks loyally year over year over year, but not really having to go prove the impact of what you were doing, we, consumers of nonprofit organizations, are savvy shoppers these days. And if we find an organization, no matter how big or how small, doing something that you're doing better than you're doing, okay, and advocating or supporting the cause better than you're doing, we are not loyal like we were a generation ago. We'll take our support and our advocacy down the street.
That's one of the things that Westmoreland Community Connections is focusing on, the impact of our not-for-profits in Westmoreland County and all of southwestern Pennsylvania that has the impact for Westmoreland County and southwestern Pennsylvania, or the Irwin or Derry and stuff like that. But I mean, how do you predict the social sector will continue to evolve or change over the next generation?
I think we will continue to see what we've been seeing over the last 5 to 10 years, particularly. It doesn't matter who you are, it matters what you do. It doesn't matter what you look like. We will, I think, rely less and less on traditional ways of evaluating nonprofits. I think we will evaluate nonprofits not on their bottom line, not on their 990 forms, but we will evaluate them in terms of true community impact. Younger, folks under 40 years old, for example, they're not researching IRS forms 990 before they decide to contribute. They are researching social media. They're not looking at your books and your overhead as much as they are saying, okay, are you moving the needle in the community, and are you inviting the community to collaboratively play a part in doing that? And so I think collaboration between nonprofits will be the kind of the benchmark of the next 20 to 25 years. My personal hope is that results in kind of a thinning of the ranks of the nonprofit community here, because forced collaboration, which will only really happen when the funding carrot is lined up that way. And so to get grant dollars, to get donor dollars, to get corporate dollars, you will have to come together and collaborate. My hope and my projection of the reality is that will be the situation.
You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on Hometown Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. We will be right back after these messages.
This is Westmoreland Community Connections on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. If you have a suggestion for a topic, or if your nonprofit organization would like to be featured on this program, call us during regular business hours at 724-216-1200.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of St. Anne Home.
Welcome back. You're listening to Westmoreland Community Connections on Hometown Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB. I'm your host, Chad Amond, President and CEO of the Westmoreland County Chamber of Commerce. I'm delighted to have Scott Kokoski. He is the Managing Director of Changing Our World. Changing Our World focuses on impacting positively not-for-profit organizations. That's what Westmoreland Community Connections is focused on. Scott, we always hear about overhead as it relates to not-for-profit organizations. What is this all about?
So why, Chad, in the corporate world, and certainly as head of the chamber, you deal with corporate leadership every day, all day. Yeah. Why in the corporate world don't we have a problem with paying an executive, a CEO, what they are worth, right? Paying a good CFO what they are worth. But we have a problem with that in the nonprofit world. Why is it a sin to be a capitalist in the for-profit world, but when we evaluate a charity, okay, or look at a nonprofit agency here, we would look at the salary, okay, or the compensation of that leader and say, well, they shouldn't make that much because they work at a charity. This overhead conception is to me a myth and a misconception. We rely on nonprofit agencies to serve a very, very important role in our community here in Westmoreland County. Okay, frankly, go back to the founding of our country, Chad. This country was not set up to take care of every ill that affected society. The nonprofit sector from the very beginning of America was needed. Okay, and so it's a very important part of the community and the county of which we're in today and where we live in today. But we don't want those who work in the sector to make what they're worth. We pay very close attention to how much they're spending on marketing materials or fundraising materials or administrative overhead. But we need them at the same time to be strong, and that means that they have to spend money on infrastructure, and they have to frankly go out and get and pay good people. And one of the trends today, Chad, in Westmoreland County and beyond, is that corporate leaders are looking to trade in success for significance and go into the nonprofit sector and lead these organizations in the same manner of effectiveness and efficiency that they did in their corporate lives. So when we hear people talk about, oh, there's so much overhead in these nonprofits and that means they're bad nonprofits, that's just frankly not true. And I wish we could advance past that conversation.
Well, I always say no profit, no mission, right?
Yeah, no money, no mission.
Yeah, no money, no mission. But it's not always folks focused on 40 hours a week to do the profit. It's the mission. And
that laughter you hear is every nonprofit leader in Westmoreland County chuckling at the notion that they just work a 40-hour week.
Well, yeah, it's not 24/7 anymore. It's 25/8.
That's right.
We need to pass legislation for the day between Tuesday and Wednesday, right?
Yes,
that's the day off.
That's
right?
the day that we need.
Well, I mean, if you want to reach out to Scott, if you have a not-for-profit organization, reach out to him at 720-648-2722 or go on to changingourworld.com. That's changingourworld.com, or reach out to Scott at 720-648-2722. Scott, another question. If someone is looking to volunteer or get involved in a not-for-profit world, how would he or she go about that?
25 years ago, if you wanted to work in the nonprofit world, you couldn't go to a college or university in this area and find a degree program in nonprofit management or something similarly named. Now you can, and that's a great thing. A number of educational institutions have those degree programs. In terms of volunteering, every nonprofit needs volunteers, and even those that don't advertise for volunteers need them. I would say find the charities that you think do great work in the community, and then go, frankly, make a cold call, knock down their doors, go find the executive director or the volunteer coordinator and ask what opportunities there are to be involved with the mission.
Well, I mean, it's a changing world. I never thought I was going to be one of those back in my day guys, but I'm impacting that. But I mean, how does different generations approach volunteering and giving and other things?
Right. Well, so giving is a real fascinating study, right? We're living in 2019, and we can simplify this conversation by saying there are three primary generations that are alive today, that are participating in the economy and participating in kind of adult life. The first, and unfortunately this generation is dying off by the day, but we call them the silent generation. Okay, this is the World War II generation. Chad, these folks are today in their 80s and 90s and beyond. They are quiet participators. The key word for this generation is the word you. These are folks who do the right thing, are consumed with doing the right thing. They don't give to charity out of wanting personal fanfare. It's all about the word you because you need this support. These folks gave birth to the baby boomers, and the baby boomers who are now retiring in the retirement age en masse. The key word that defines this generation as it relates to philanthropy and nonprofit and giving and volunteering is the word me. All right. If you think about and I don't want to cause any controversy, although it'd be good for ratings, right, of the show. If you think about the time in which the baby boomers grew up, they were children of the late 60s and the 70s. This is the revolutionary generation. This is the countercultural time, okay? And this was a group of young people who were saying to their parents, I'm going to be totally different than you. I'm going to be opposite than you, and look at me rebel, okay? And that defined, and I know I'm generalizing here, but that defined how they approached their work, their kind of ascension professionally and personally, and their giving and their volunteering and their societal behavior. It was about building my kingdom, and I give for me. I want my name on a building. I want my recognition. That generation gave birth to the Gen X, Gen Y, millennial generation, and we know that this generation approaches the world, views the world very, very differently than the generation before, and it impacts how they relate to nonprofit organizations, community organizations, what they want to do in their giving and in their volunteering. The key word there is we. There's nothing that someone young loves more than to go to a website of a community agency or a nonprofit and see that red thermometer climb with every $20 or $25 gift. Right. You think about political candidates today and how they raise money. It's not cool. Well, it is cool to raise money $100,000 at a time, $1 million at a time. But what do you see all of these political candidates doing? They're trying to raise money $6 at a time, $20 at a time, $1, one vote, one like, one retweet, one post at a time. We are entering now really the age as the millennials occupy the greatest percentage of the workforce, the greatest percentage of the giving public, the age of we. The community giving, the community elevating of organizations.
We're talking with Scott Kokoski. He is the managing director of Changing Our World. Scott, give a quick summary of what Changing Our World does and how you will impact the local not-for-profits.
I want every nonprofit agency in our community to succeed, to be able to understand, express and articulate their why, to be able to put themselves in the best possible position to raise money, to raise the stakes, and to ultimately raise impact for what they are doing. Our firm is a 20-year-old organization that essentially is a team of impact consultants, and we focus in the education, the faith-based, the social services, and the healthcare arenas within our community. And we take organizations through a journey of self-assessment, through a journey of understanding how to get to the next level, whether that is infrastructurally, whether that is philanthropically, whether that is in terms of messaging and media and communications, whether that is getting through a fundraising campaign for a new program, for a new facility, for an endowment or something like that. And so the firm is worldwide, including with an office here in Pittsburgh. And our job is to, again, understand how to turn challenges of these organizations into successes, and we're doing that every day.
If you want to reach out to Scott, he's the managing director of Changing Our World. Go on to changingourworld.com or call him at 720-648-2722. Scott, are there particular issues in southwestern Pennsylvania that affect us that don't impact the rest of the country? I mean, I mean, sometimes people in southwestern Pennsylvania, I live in Latrobe, and I think I need to have my passport to go to Pittsburgh, something like that.
Yeah.
But I mean, southwestern Pennsylvania is different than part of the country.
Oh, it sure is. And having lived and worked around the country, I think a couple of things off the top. Number one is we have a population, conversation happening now. It's no secret to anyone that we live in one of the most aging areas of the country in terms of population aging. We're not necessarily replacing those natural population losses. When people grow old and pass away, we're not replenishing the population as quickly as we're losing it. There are corollaries and relations there to the nonprofit space. So we have a greater than average number, for example, of aging services nonprofits, of continuing care retirement communities that are nonprofit. The healthcare world here is shaped much differently in terms of the nonprofit space as it is in other parts of the country. So I think that our population demographic is different here. And then the second major thing is, again, if you've lived in this community for quite a while, you understand that we have transitioned from coal and steel, not that they're not here anymore, but we have transitioned from an economy that's dominant manufacturing and dominant coal steel economy to eds, meds, tech-based economy, and that impacts a lot. It impacts the availability and the amount of capital here in the community, and that impacts our ability to think creatively and ingenuitively about how we approach social problems in the community, and that's manifesting itself today in how the nonprofit community is shaped.
Oh, I always bring it up. The Chamber was a part of the key part of the comprehensive plan for the county, and the people that we have a declining population, but it's not that those people are moving.
They're not
out.
moving. No.
But when the steel industry collapsed in the late 70s and early 80s, those people that were not seniority, they had to move to find more jobs, and that's why the Steeler bars are all over the country. And so I just want to make sure that the listeners know that southwestern Pennsylvania is not a bad place to live, but we need to increase the population. And so that's one of the things that the not-for-profits are focusing on.
And thank goodness that we have a nonprofit community here that is intent on making life as great as it can be, serving all that it can in Western Pennsylvania. But we also have a very, very good amount of 2- and 4-year colleges and universities that aren't just graduating kids who move away. That rate of flight has dropped significantly. Kids who come to Pittsburgh, southwestern Pennsylvania for college are staying here in greater percentages than they are before. Kids who grow up here are staying here for college because they see around them that there are opportunities for them to make a living, support a family, and involve themselves in the community that they don't have to move to another city for.
If you serve as an executive director or serve on a not-for-profit board, I would highly suggest that you reach out to Scott Kokoski. He is the managing director of Changing Our World, 720-648-2722, or reach out to him on changingourworld.com. Last question, Scott. What is the biggest takeaways for our listeners should get for the conversation today?
Well, number one, I would say that if you are not involved, two things. If you're not involved with a nonprofit in a role of a volunteer or a donor or a board member, we have so many options in southwestern Pennsylvania and Westmoreland County for you to avail yourself to do something positive to contribute to the growth and vitality of the community. Second, if you are involved with a nonprofit, maybe you work at one, maybe you're a board member of one, maybe you're a volunteer of one, take advantage of opportunities to collaborate and to come together and talk. Join the chamber. And I couldn't emphasize that enough because there are nonprofit members of the chamber. It's not just for a business, for a for-profit entity. Come together and find those organizations where you can share your challenges, you can share your concerns, and where folks like us can work with you. You're not alone in your struggles. Every organization has struggles and challenges, but we can help you turn those into successes. But so can sharing your story and your struggle with others who are kind of also with their fingernails in the dirt in the community as well.
Thank you very much, Scott. If you're a listener and want to reach out to Scott, changingourworld.com or call him directly at 720-648-2722. You've been listening to Westmoreland Community Connections. Join us next week, same time, same place, for another edition of Westmoreland Community Connections. Thanks for listening, everyone.
This has been Westmoreland Community Connections, a look at issues and happenings in and around Westmoreland County. Join us again next week on Classic Hits 107.1 WHJB.
Westmoreland Community Connections is a presentation of St. Anne Home.